Very Bad Wizards is a podcast with a philosopher, my dad, and a psychologist, Dave Pizarro, having an informal discussion about issues in science and ethics. Please note that the discussion contains bad words that I'm not allowed to say, and knowing my dad, some very inappropriate jokes.
You must have thought it was White Boy Day. Huh? It ain't White Boy Day, is it? Oh, man, it ain't White Boy Day.
The great Oz has spoken. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Who are you? Who are you? A very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Good man. They think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have.
Pay no attention to that man.
Anybody can have a brain.
You're a very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Just a very bad wizard.
Welcome to Very Bad Wizards. I'm Tamler Summers from the University of Houston. Dave, Labor Day weekend is here. The summer of Glenn Powell has come to an end. I know it's hard to choose just one, but what was your favorite Glenn Powell moment this summer?
I barely know who Glenn Powell is.
Do you know who he is? My guess was that it was 50-50 whether you would know who he is at all.
No, I just Googled him and I know who he is, like the actor Glenn Powell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize him, but no, I didn't.
He was in a lot of movies this summer. Twisters. The Linklater movie, Hitman. Everyone was just, critics were just fawning over him. Everybody loves him. He's a UT guy, a Texas guy, so, he's very involved with there. But, all that said, I don't think he's that good. I saw him in Everybody Wants Some. I thought he was very funny. As a side comic character in a Linklater hangout movie, he was great for that. But I saw Hitman. I saw it in the theater, and then with a remote Q&A afterwards with him and Linklater, and I hated his performance. I thought it sucked. The movie itself was just mediocre, but in large part because his performance was really bad. And then he was just a dick in the Q&A. Not a dick, a douche. So I'm completely mystified why everybody loves him.
I always wonder how much the studio engines do this thing. Can they stir up this kind of buzz? We know that this obviously happened in the golden age of Hollywood.
Yes.
That's all they did.
Yeah.
But are they able to do that now?
Yeah. They had rooms where they would talk about who they're going to make a star, who she's going to sleep with,
right.
Who she's
smoking men in fedoras, putting press releases out.
But it's one thing when you're doing that with Cary Grant or Katharine Hepburn or Loretta Lynn or somebody. It's another thing when it's Glenn Powell. It's just another just degeneration. There's no movie stars, or there are very few movie stars.
Yeah.
And so they're desperate to have one, but I don't think he's the guy. Anyway, that's way too much Glenn Powell talk, but I can't believe people were calling it the Glenn Powell summer,
Jesus Christ.
It was, like a lot of things. It actually relates to the second segment and what we're talking about then. We are talking about a paper called... Actually, Trixie tore off the first page of my...
It's called Beyond Newton, Why Assumptions of Universality Are Critical to Cognitive Science and How to Finally Move Past Them.
Yes, by...
Crouppen, Davis, and Henrich, of which I know Henrich, obviously.
Joe Henrich, former guest on the show, a interviewee in A Very Bad Wizard, Morality Behind the Curtain. Great. Actually, researcher, one of my favorite researchers going right now.
Totally.
But first, okay. So this was something I put into Slack at some point, or you did. I don't even remember which one.
You did.
Yeah. It is called Friend, and it is an AI chat box, I guess. It comes as a necklace with a little circle that has a recorder on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, does it talk? I couldn't. We're going to go through the video. It doesn't talk. But so that thing just...
it just records.
It's a physical reminder that it's there, but really it's just, it's like a wire, but a wire that you wear like on the outside.
Yeah, it's close to parody. Like it's just not, you can't even... It doesn't talk. What it does is...
it texts.
Sends you a message. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, first of all, what intrigued you about this? I assume that you were looking maybe for some friendship somewhere.
I both was looking for it and then I found it with friend. I urge people, if they're not driving or, out for a walk, to go to friend.com, and they have a nice little 2-minute video describing, what it is. And I think it's probably best to just go through the video and, introduce it to our listeners. This isn't a sponsor. We don't do sponsors anymore. We are just intrigued.
You and I watch the video.
Okay.
Gosh, I'm out of breath. We made it. Woo!
All right, just to set the stage, a young Asian woman taking a hike in nature,
quote unquote.
Quote unquote.
It just looks like set dressing, like so badly. It looks like when you go and you buy like fake plants at the dollar store of like different varieties and you just set them in front of the camera.
Or like a Hitchcock, like a person taking a hike in a Hitchcock movie.
Right.
You see the young Asian woman talking, saying that she's kind of out of breath, although this does not seem like a difficult hike.
She's wearing the necklace. First of all, she's like weirdly talking to herself, celebrating that she made it to the top of this studio.
There does not seem like there's any incline in where she is.
Gives a woo and then presses the center of her chest where this dangling pendant is. And she immediately reaches into her purse, pulls out her phone, and there's a text from Amy that says, "Well, at least we're outside." And
she says, "That's fair." And they continue.
All right, let's go.
Let me show you how to game, bro, okay? Oh, come on. Oh, let's go!
Are you serious? Come on, man. I hate this game.
Take notes, baby.
Now we have two, let's say, mixed race men, one in a sweater vest.
There's three, but it pans out a little bit. A very diverse. I think it's Hispanic, black, and white.
Okay, sure.
Playing video games. They're all gaming.
They are all with each other, right? Like,
Yes.
This is actually like the most social thing I would imagine that people like this do. There are three of them there playing a video game. One of the guys, the guy who has the pendant, is getting killed. And so Jackson texts him, "You're getting thrashed. It's embarrassing."
And he's just bummed. He's sitting in the center. He's getting beaten at video games, and he's just clearly depressed. And then to add insult to injury, his AI companion says, "You're getting thrashed, bro."
You're getting thrashed. It's embarrassing. I guess that's like, how black people talk.
Yeah, I wonder if you could specify the race of your AI companion.
There's one YouTube that says, "Imagine getting bullied by a necklace you bought." You know what this reminds me of is Job's dummy in Arrested Development. I think his name might have been Jackson, right?
No, it was Franklin.
Franklin, that's right.
Let me give that oatmeal some brown sugar.
My wife, you bastard!
Oh, man, what's the matter?
Franklin said some things Whitey just wasn't ready to hear.
Okay, now we have a girl, but wait, like, what is she doing?
She's watching a movie on her phone, as we all admit is the best way to watch or a TV show.
Okay.
And eating a falafel. As she's watching the show, a notification comes and interrupts the show and says, "This show is so underrated."
Oh my God.
And she goes, "I know, right? The effects are so good." And then the AI, as if to show us that the AI knows exactly what she's doing, it says, "How's the falafel?"
Yeah.
It's like, let me watch the fucking show. Like, do I need to pay an AI to like interrupt me like my parents would?
Yeah, I know. I would be pissed.
By the way, then she's like spills some falafel juice, like some tzatziki, like onto the thing, and is like, "Oh, I'm sorry for getting you messy."
And the thing goes yum. like it can see her too.
That has to be bullshit.
Yeah,
that has to be bullshit.
I think that's bullshit too. Okay, this is, I think, the weirdest and creepiest scene. Like the other ones are just kind of lame and sad, but it's a woman, like a young woman, I don't know, like 17, 18, and a guy also around that age. I don't think there was a problematic age difference here. Yeah, they're on a roof. I don't know if that's a cross in the background or just telephone poles.
No, it's just a telephone pole. But it's like, Brooklyn rooftop, like,
Yeah.
It's really nice up here. How'd you find this place?
I don't know. I just kind of like to come up here to be by myself. I've never brought anybody else. I mean, besides her.
She goes everywhere with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're making small talk. It's awkward. And I think we're supposed to get the sense that she's very awkward. She's the one with the AI companion around her neck.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know. I guess I've just come up here on my own and never brought anybody else.
But then she says, I mean, besides her, holding up the AI friend. And then the guy says, she goes everywhere with you, right? And I feel like you can see him like, like, do I really want to go down this path?
It's another Arrested Development. It's like when he realizes Charlize Theron might not be.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, man, she's kind of hot, but like
she's wearing a fucking AI necklace.
And then he says a more normal thing, like, I guess I must be doing something right. And she says, I guess so. We'll see. And then she gives a little look there, which I don't know if this is as the character or as the actress, but a look of despair, a kind of bleak, like what's happening.
Well, okay, but wait, what she does is when he says that I must be doing something right, she says, I guess, she goes to touch her AI companion and she stops herself from doing it. And then she looks at him as if this has brought her to this moment and now she no longer needs the crutch that is her AI friend. Now she's about to actually talk to this real life person.
Wait, so maybe this makes sense within your interpretation. We should do like a YouTube video about this, but like on your interpretation, she just has that normal feeling of anxiety, that feeling of anxiety that you get that makes you take out your phone or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
But then she realizes, no, like there's there's a boy here.
I'm making a connection.
I'm making a real connection. And so you've gotten me to this place.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I used to bring only you up here because I couldn't deal with like other human beings. And now here I am with this cute boy.
I'm spreading my wings now. Yeah. I view it more as either the actress or the character, or maybe we're supposed to wonder whether that's even a hard distinction, is suddenly realizing, oh my God, what has society come to right now? And then she just goes back to doing like the normal thing, including maybe the thing that you're talking about. But I see a look right before she does the thing, which is just a brief little glimpse of like, oh my God.
Almost like disgust almost.
Almost like she snapped into reality for a second, like in Mulholland Drive, they often like, as the dream is starting to unravel, she gets little glimpses into like what's actually real. That's how I see it. That's my interpretation,
I buy it too. Yeah. Like, and it might be the actress who's like, what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to act in like Shakespeare and like, I wanted to be in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Can I just take a step back and say like, this is just like Black Mirror parody. Like there is no way I ever thought that within this short span of time, we'd be actually seeing a real live advertisement like this.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's like Her, the movie, that's essentially what this thing is, except that it doesn't talk. And it's not Scarlett Johansson, and it's not smart. It just seems to just give you just like total cliches every time you, I guess, trigger it. Like, do you have to tell it? I guess clearly not, right?
Okay, so it's always listening. And I think what happens is when you want it to respond to you, for sure, you trigger it.
So it says, talk, speak your mind, or gossip about what your friend overheard. Nobody would be friends with this person.
That's the thing. Like, if somebody is wearing this around you.
Yeah, this person would be a pariah. It's just like having like a narc. I would jump off that roof if I was that guy.
Right. And that's what, like, one of the things that ended Google Glass is people were afraid, like they were concerned about being recorded. But even Google Glass had like a little light showing whenever the camera was on.
Yeah.
Like this thing is just constantly on.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about who did this. So the guy who created it is this guy, Avi Schiffman, who you might have come across him a few years ago because he was all over like the press for a second there as a teenager who developed this COVID tracking website. He created this website that scraped data from all these places and presented it in this central dashboard. And like he was like the darling of the, the New York Times or whatever for a second there.
Sure, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Schiffman, 17, boy with a dream, like
he's going to be very big in surveillance and like keeping tabs on where we are and what we believe.
Yeah, right. So here's the thing. Friend.com. You might think, oh, that's a cool domain name that he got, friend.com.
Yeah.
The guy apparently raised like a little over $2 million in seed funding and paid $1.8 million for that name, for that domain name.
It is unbelievable how, given that this is like a commercial, and so he could make up anything, everything the thing says is like banal beyond belief. It's just pure cliche.
I have a feeling that this is not going to really see the light of day.
No. No.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can do this on your phone with ChatGPT now. And so I guess the question is there any value in anything like this?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to go well. In fact, none of these things ever go well. I was listening to some podcast, like a Bill Simmons podcast, and he had Millennial God, Derek Thompson, like their technology guy. And he was talking about the Apple glasses. Like this was, I don't know, beginning of the summer or sometime around that. And he thought this was going to explode. That in like 3 or 4 months, like everyone was going to have these, and it's so cool. You can go to a cafe, but still do your work and like act and like watch something or whatever. And I was like, that's weird. I haven't heard anything about these things. Yeah. And like, it's just completely vanished, right? The Google Glasses was the same thing. There was a similar kind of commercial that like everyone thought this can't be real. Like it's too lame even as a joke.
Yeah, the Apple stuff, I feel like there's a particular kind of person who, I don't know, it's the same kind of like people who like fall for NFTs as like this cool thing. It's just like, no, like, come on. There's just the constraint of reality. No one wants to strap a 3-pound computer on their face and go to a coffee shop. Like that's just not going to happen, especially now when it's $3,500.
Yeah.
Like something like this will happen eventually where we'll have glasses that give us like directions and stuff, Yeah. But not this, not the way that people are. Yeah.
I think that's a really good analogy, the NFTs, where like if you were a normal person and not already like bought into this weird cult, like you were like, what do you mean? Like, so I'm getting a JPEG? And we're like, no, but it's actually like its own thing. And, like you will have the one that's like official. They'll just have the same exact JPEG, but it won't be like official. And everyone's like, what? And I think it's exactly what you said. Like there's that guardrail that they don't have, which is why the fuck would anybody want this?
Totally. And it's like I think a lot of this shit is cool, like, and it has its uses. But to think that the world is going to like all of a sudden start interacting with their AI companions all the time. Let me get a sense of the reality, like the possibility of this. Do you have an Alexa or like, do you talk to Siri or anything?
No, in fact, and I don't like it. Like I don't do it. Like I don't like when I go to somebody's house and they're constantly talking to Alexa. I don't like. It's just it gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, and I would never want that.
Yeah. So I have, as you might imagine, everything you can get, and I never talk to them except for like turn the lights on. Yeah. Right. Or like set a timer. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Right. Maybe it's because I'm one of those people that doesn't have the internal monologue, like the verbal. I don't have that verbal stream. Do you remember on Mr. Robot, the cop chick who would like talk to her Alexa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And like jerk off with it.
Yeah.
Like,
Meryl Streep's daughter. Yep.
Yeah. Meryl Streep's daughter. Right. Like again, it's something that I could do, but like never would in a million years.
But I think that's just, it's not because you have no internal monologue. It's just because you're a normal person. Like,
maybe I'm trying to. I'm just saying, like, it just would seem extra weird. But $100 says though we will get people emailing us saying like, you guys are crazy. Like, I would love to have like conversations with.
I actually don't think so, because this particular one, like you said, they spent all the money on the website
friend.com
on friend.com and the video. Like, the thing can't say anything interesting to you. Like, why would you not just listen to a podcast or go on like Reddit or something?
Right.
But yeah,
like
maybe
literally talk to yourself.
I'm willing to be surprised about that. I've been surprised about ChatGPT and all the people who use that for all sorts of different things. I have the same thing. Like, I know I could probably be useful for writing like a letter of recommendation or stuff like that. There's something about it that I don't like. And
so even for that, like, I was just talking to somebody about this today. I guess if you're a coder, like if you're doing programming, ChatGPT is super helpful. Or if you're a foreign language speaker, maybe it will help edit. But who actually chats with it?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I don't think anybody's doing, you know?
Do you remember the chatbot that got very jealous and abusive towards the guy?
That was like the Microsoft one.
Yeah, that was awesome. Like, if friend.com could do that, like if this necklace would all of a sudden just be like, I want to fuck you and I want that like whore out of the house.
I know exactly what you want, dude. I know. I'm going to design it for you.
Yeah.
It's going to be a Latina girlfriend who gets angry with you when you look at other women.
Yes. Sign me up. Pre-order.
I saw you, Tamler. Hijo de puta.
Oh, no, you didn't. Just look at that.
You're not allowed.
I can't do that.
You could be a Jewish girlfriend.
No. Cancel the pre-order.
All right. Well, I might order it. Oh, the last thing I wanted to say about this, I forgot, because this is an important part of his pitch, is so you talk to it and you like whatever, develop, like it remembers things about you, I guess. And if you lose it or if it breaks, you never get that back. Like that particular like personality, like never, it just dies. And so like, that's what he says. Like it'll die. Like if you like break it or lose it. And so you'll never, it's like a super Tamagotchi, you know, like remember those little electronic pets?
Yeah. That's crazy. So it wants to make you feel guilty if you come to your senses. Like,
it is a Jewish girlfriend.
Well, first of all, the slogan also, I like friend, not imaginary. I mean, I think that's up for a debate.
Yeah, like, he probably paid another $200,000 for that slogan.
Is it not imaginary? Last thing, just trying to describe what it looks like, because I see this close-up picture right now. Something like Hal's eye. Is that what it's going for?
Yeah, Hal's eye, or a mini Iron Man power source in the middle of his chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, if you get it and you like it, let us know. We'll probably read your like testimonial.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back to talk about cognitive science and universality. Welcome back to Very Bad Wizards. Just a quick note on how to support us if you'd like, and also get in touch with us. If you'd like to reach out, email us at verybadwizards@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at Peas, at Tamler, or at Very Bad Wizards. You can follow us on Instagram. We post all the episodes there. Like us on Facebook, and join the Reddit community. They also post all of our episodes, and there's a lot of other VBW discussion there. A little dead lately, frankly. Get it together, Redditors, Reddit people, Reddit cases. I don't know. Oh, and please follow me on Letterboxd. I've been posting a bunch of reviews. You can get mad at me for giving Interstellar 2 stars, which honestly I think is kind of generous. Lots of other stuff, so I hope to see you there. And of course, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you review podcasts. That really helps other people find us. If you want to support us in even more tangible ways, the best thing you can do is join our Patreon. Now that we don't do ads anymore, we depend on Patreon pretty much exclusively to keep this show going. And we have a whole archive of bonus content for you at various different tiers, including The Ambulators, our episode-by-episode deep dive on the brilliant TV series Deadwood. We're all the way up to the last 3 episodes of season 3, and we'll be releasing the next episode next off week. We also have monthly Ask Us Anythings, our 5-part series on the brothers Karamazov, 4 episodes of Overton Windows, my side hustle with Robert Wright, and tons of other good bonus episodes on movies, David Lynch, Star Trek, Rick and Morty, lots more. Thank you so much for your support. It really does mean the world to us. Now let's get back to the episode.
All right, let's get to the main segment where we're talking, like we said, about an article called Beyond Newton, Why Assumptions of Universality Are Critical to Cognitive Science and How to Finally Move Past Them, by Ivan Krupin, Helen Davis, and Joseph Henrich. So this is a psych review paper that came out just recently, 2024. It's very Bad Wizard's wheelhouse, because it's starting off with like this central problem in cognitive science, and one that Joe Henrich has been very concerned about for quite some time, as have many cognitive scientists. And that is, like, it just is the case that cognitive science is concerned with studying human universals. So universal features of human cognition. Like, that's the goal, at least. I've just started teaching my intro psych course a couple days ago, and that's one of the things I tell them. Like, most of psychology is interested in studying human universals. Like, there's a lot that's interested in cultural differences and individual differences, but by and large, like, we feel the most sciencey when we're saying something that is true just of the mind in general. The example that I think psychologists love to get to is perception. So what you might call visual cognition. And so, like, the features of the mind that are concerned with representing the external world by converting whatever images, like the raw images, into something that we can use. So the way that we see shapes and the way that we see edges and the way that we parse objects, like that sort of thing. I think that's the closest you could come to uncontroversial.
And even that, right, like on the margins, like the Mueller-Lyer illusion is not as present in places where people live outdoors or in huts and stuff like that. And there's not as many like right angles.
That's right. And so you have, like, that's a great example of how, like, it becomes hard to tease apart what might be universal and what might be non-universal. And so what these authors, they want to call this assumption of universality the Newtonian principle. And the idea is here simple, that just like Newton came up with these universal laws of motion, right, the universal law of gravitation that affects every single object in the known universe in the same exact way, the laws of motion that work on everything, whether it's us, like the ball that we're playing with, or the planet spinning around the sun. That kind of universalizability is the goal of a good science. Context-independent features, universal features of human cognition. And they think that this is an assumption that is implicit, unstated, and just sort of people assume. Like, it's the default assumption whenever you're reading cognitive science.
And it's certainly not defended.
That's right.
If you have this on like a large enough sample of human beings, even if they're part of the same culture, you can just kind of assume that it would generalize.
The paper doesn't get into, I think, too much of this, but it is a funny kind of tension to be a psychologist and know for a fact that most of our samples are from these Western, often college kids, but nowadays maybe internet samples of Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, the weird samples that Henrich has talked about. To know that for a fact, to know that like 99% of everything that we study is on those people, and yet to still maintain this assumption of universality.
Would you say that's a fair characterization, nevertheless, of what cognitive scientists do?
Yes, But I think that there is a good reason for some of it that is not stated in this article.
Can we just back up 1 second? I know not everybody has listened to all of our episodes and may not be familiar with the work of Joe Henrich, but he has been, as Dave noted, attacking this assumption of universality, not just in cognitive science, but actually in earlier work, probably more focused on cultural norms, intuitions about justice, intuitions about punishment, and has been successfully challenging these views by performing experiments on non-weird samples, because he's originally an anthropologist and spent time in the Peruvian Amazon doing ultimatum games and prisoner's dilemmas and dictator games and getting vastly different results in different parts of the world. And so this is, I think, a real challenge that people have acknowledged but not necessarily responded to yet. And you can see a little bit of frustration, I feel, in the paper, that people are still doing the thing that he pointed out 15 years ago that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. And what I like about this paper specifically, though, is that it's not just a takedown, like a silly people, why don't you realize that like you can't universalize, you can't make claims about universal
like I would do.
Human cognition. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But it's trying to offer a way out. And specifically, and they do, like, I don't know what you thought about the paper. Like, the paper does do a lot of what I read as hemming and hawing about what they're not claiming. And so they're like, look, we're not saying that there aren't universal features of cognition. They're trying to move past the dichotomy by presenting a principle that they think can guide the way that we think about the relationship between culture-specific and universal features of cognition, which is the real, I think the real contribution of this paper. I totally am with you that there's the frustration there. And I think that frustration is like, how can we do a better job of talking about this and conceptualizing these differences without just falling into this?
No, actually, there's a constructive, if sketchy, way forward. And there's a diagnosis, which I think is important to this paper, of how and why this has happened, that people have this Newtonian universality assumption that if you do it on any sample, you can generalize. And it's actually a pretty interesting diagnosis, one that I hadn't come across, at least not in this form beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get to that diagnosis, let's talk a little bit about what they mean when they say that there is this implicit assumption. Yeah. So they say, despite the absence of representative samples, classical cognitive science abounds with claims of universality. These are typically not stated openly. Rather, they are usually treated as another unmarked default. Perhaps the most common form of universalist claim is entirely implicit. Namely, authors often simply omit any discussion of what cultural environments this capacity is relevant in and or likely to have developed in response to. And so they say that you can tell that this is a guiding assumption from a few features of the literature. One is, obviously, the lack of cross-cultural samples. If you're not even bothering to get cross-cultural samples, it's because you think that you don't need them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's kind of the most obvious one.
The most obvious, right? Then the other thing that was interesting, which totally makes sense, I guess I just never thought about that much, was the lack of actually describing any of the cultural contexts.
Right.
Right. So even if I'm doing my study on undergrads at Cornell University, my lack of even going out of my way to describe what culture they belong to, aside from the most minimal of demographic information.
And why the cognitive ability that you're describing is helpful or adaptive in that kind of environment. It's so out of their heads to even think that way. I think there's maybe I don't know what you think of this, an implicit early 90s evolutionary psychology kind of assumption that the real environment that we're talking about is the environment of evolutionary adaptedness in the Pleistocene 200,000 years ago or whatever. And so what the environment is now is kind of irrelevant.
You have cognitive faculties like you have arms. Sure, of course, arms evolved in a particular ecological environment, but what does that matter?
In a factory town, they're helpful for getting a job in a factory, but that's not why we have arms.
Right. So the other thing they point out is that we don't even have the terminology to say what you were just saying, which is that people will point to they'll say, okay, there are two ends of the spectrum. One is completely innate stuff. And then at the other end is completely culturally dependent stuff.
Yeah.
And so we don't even have a good set of linguistic and conceptual tools for talking about the relationship between cognitive mechanisms and the environment that they manifest themselves in.
Yeah, we don't have a framework for really discussing that. I think this is exactly what he's trying to introduce.
And so here's where we get to like some of this diagnosis that I feel kind of foolish for never having thought about it that much. But they point to what they call the boundary problem. They say, look, it's not so dumb for cognitive scientists to be making some kind of tacit assumption like this, because there is an inherent problem built into the thing that we're studying, which is what is the proper domain of like generalizing when we're talking about cognitive mechanisms? So we have probably cognitive mechanisms that are universal, like everybody has a brain. So there's probably some sort of cognitive mechanism that's universal. And then we have like things that are maybe specific to populations of people or groups of cultures or maybe subcultures. And then you have things that are specific to individuals, like idiosyncratic features of the cognition of specific individuals. How do you go about like demarcating what the proper level that you should be looking at if you want to build a science, like a generalizable science of some sort?
Or just a science of some sort.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like the right thing to do is to just treat every individual as its own unique snowflake of cognitive abilities.
Right.
Like that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Right. Here's where they say like, I mean, you could just say all of cognition should be properly studied only as individuals, the cognition of individuals, but you're sacrificing quite a bit. Like if you're sacrificing what seems to be one of the main goals of science. And they refer to this as taking a postmodern holiday. And they say, which I kind of believe, although I'm not an anthropologist, that this happened kind of in anthropology, that there is a lack of any kind of generalizability in these fields that got so kind of spooked by claims of universality that they've like retreated into just doing like individual ethnographies. Like I'm going to just study this one guy and what he was talking about and thinking.
Yeah.
So as they say, if all possible levels of generalizations are legitimate, each level of generalization is liable to find those who would defend its importance. This leaves cognitive science in danger of departing on the same postmodern holiday, which saw cultural anthropology stop engaging with generalizable research altogether.
I want to press on that, but before we get to that, there's something I just want to add to the presentation of the boundary problem, because I do think it's really interesting and that there's no obvious solution to it, right? Yeah. So like when you're doing physics, electrons are electrons. Now they might not have the same properties when you observe them or when you don't observe them, but every electron is the same. But every person is different. You know, in that way, every person is a unique snowflake. So now there's this question, like, where do we draw the line at what is just like a biography of a single person and what is a science? And there's no clear place to draw the line. Like, you certainly could just say, okay, the people of Devonshire seem to have these norms and these abilities. And like, you would still be doing science if you did that. You would be studying the people of Devonshire and presumably doing experimental methods, descriptive research, all of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like a normative thing of like, but is that interesting? And don't you want to know, like, is this something that generalizes to all of the UK or maybe even Europe or the West, you know, like, but the more you try to generalize, the more you're going to sacrifice. So it's not something that science itself can determine. It's like a normative judgment of what you're interested in.
Yeah. Or at least it's what you look for is going to be determined by some sort of value that you hold. Because as they're sort of pointing out with this boundary problem, you could imagine some community, that small community, Devonshire or whatever your example is, where you have a bunch of cognitive scientists studying those people, and then somebody comes along and says, you're crazy to study the whole town as if they were all the same, right? What you need to study is the family. Right. And then somebody would say, you're crazy to study families, like every individual. And so you're in real danger of going all the way down to not only the level of individuals, but the level of individual at time 1, individual at time 2, individual time 3. Right. And that just, like, it doesn't seem like the natural world needs to call for that much. In the same way that, you know, we study the digestive tract, even though we know that everybody is slightly different, right? It's like, what do you want to get out of the scientific study of human cognition? Do you want to try to get something that is going to be true of larger groups of people, or do you really want to focus on the things that aren't?
That's what I mean, though. It's about what you want. This isn't this is science and this isn't science. It's what do you want? I mean, or at least that's my initial thought about this question. It's what do you want? I think like if you're talking about medicine or you're talking about, there are serious costs to like only studying diverse populations and treating them as the same, which is precisely that you're losing particular, I would still say, scientific insights about individuals or individuals who are age 45 to 50 and aren't smokers and who are healthy and who exercise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if I'm on a postmodern holiday, but this isn't something that science itself can solve. This is a value judgment and a question about what you're interested in.
I don't know if you missed it, but that's exactly, I said it's about what you value. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
but then you
I
were
agree with
kind of
that.
leaning back and obviously we want to, I don't know. I thought you were just kind of importing.
Yeah, I think there is an obvious, right? There is an obvious thing about what we should value if what we're trying to do is describe the world, because there is just such a huge trade-off to trying to describe every single individual that like, that's just part of what it means to start doing science, is to try to make some sort of generalizations about the world. But what level of generality that is, there's still so much to be, even once you grant that we want a science that allows us some generalizations, like where you draw the line seems really, really difficult. And I don't think that there's an answer to that even in this paper, right? I think
No, I don't think we disagree that much. My point is where you draw the line is not something that is conceptually settled by the term science or something that science itself.
100% agree.
Okay.
100% agree. And it's just at that point, it's about what you want to get out of what you find. So I think there's going to be true things that you discover at every level of analysis. Like, I guess that's the part of postmodernism I would want to reject, where I'd say you will find true things about Gary versus Bob. Like, those will be true things. But if what you want to do is develop some sort of prediction about people in general, then it's not going to be that useful to look at Gary versus Bob.
And the way this is a diagnosis, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in search of an answer to this very difficult question of, competing values and conceptual understandings, one answer to that question is we only care about human universals. Like if it's not universal, there's no point in studying it. So, that is an answer to the question, but then in addition to that, they just decided, I think he calls it like the path of least effort, not to actually test whether these abilities are universal, and the way you're measuring it is, universalizable. And that's how you got into this mess.
You know that M.C. Escher drawing of a hand that's drawing a hand that's drawing a hand? Like that's like what it seems like we've gotten ourselves into. Because as they say, it's not that they're like a priori rejecting universal. It's just a weird thing that we're like, okay, we value what's universal. Let's study it in this small segment of people, refer to that study as a study of people, and then use that as evidence for universality without ever bothering to test it. It's almost like we said, put a pin in it. Like we can answer that question later, and then we've just never come back.
I got to write that down for like I'm gonna use that in my book. Put a pin in it. I'm really interested in these diagnoses because I keep coming across these things where it's like, but somebody pointed this obvious thing out in 1954. Why are people still doing it today? And it's like, I think put a pin in it is like you think it's just something that someone else will solve, or maybe I'll get around to later, but right now I have all this other stuff,
And this isn't in the paper at all, but here's one way in which we would definitely put a pin in it. And it comes from, I think, a genuine belief that one of the things that we're doing is we're developing theories and falsifying them. When you're only interested in falsifying a theory, or when you say that that's the task of science, let's say that you think that short-term memory is really going to be constrained by attention, and you say, I don't think people can keep stuff in their short-term memory for longer than 10 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And so you find that, in fact, people could keep something in their short-term memory for 15 minutes in your study.
Yeah.
There you've falsified it. And in that constrained kind of scientific step, you don't need a generalizable sample.
Right.
because you can falsify it with like a super, super constrained sample. Because if it's not true in Cornell undergraduates, it's not universally true, right? Like it can't be a universal feature of the human mind. So that's the kind of thing that we say that we're doing. All you're saying is like, if I thought this was a universal feature of the human mind, I've now shown that it's not.
Right.
And if I don't, like if in fact I have support for my hypothesis that, okay, in this sample of Cornell students, sure enough, nobody could remember things past 10 minutes in their short-term memory. Then if I want to say, I think this is a true thing about the human mind, now I got to go and start testing it in other populations.
Right. But that's not something that you do.
That's not something that we do. We just say like, okay, cool.
10 minutes, that's for everybody.
That's just, like I think that's one of the key error steps that we're making that is out of laziness and maybe out of ignorance, where we're saying we're doing this thing and then we're sneaking in the conclusion.
Yeah.
So like while we go about like designing studies or being trained in this thought that what we're doing is creating experiments to set up a hypothesis and knock it down. And if it's wrong, we falsified our theory and we improve our theory. We nonetheless like end these papers with, okay, we've demonstrated that memory is constrained to 10 minutes in this sample. And then as they say, we use words like people or children. And we say, so people have only a 10-minute short-term memory. And they're like, that really can't be the conclusion. That's like a real misstep, because now you're just completely dropping the ball on this game that you say that you're playing, which is the falsifying. And now you're saying that what you've have positive evidence for is this thing about the human mind in general.
When in fact, what you have is negative evidence for a very specific hypothesis about a very specific group of people.
Exactly. So what it is that psychologists are thinking when they're doing this, like, I'm not sure. There are some boring answers, which I think we are going about collecting data in that constrained way, that local, very sort of specific theory, falsifying theory way. And then we're rewarded for concluding things about people in general, because why else would people find this interesting or something like that? You know, it's hard to know, like, because I don't even know in myself. Like, I think that's just kind of what
it's how people are trained. It's how their mentors did it. It's how their advisors did it.
Exactly. And this is where you can get this sense like that you were referring to before. Kruppen, Davis, and Henrich are like turning over in their graves.
They're alive.
They're just like, I know. I assume they are. Yeah. I assume. Have you checked? You can
maybe
falsify
not.
That
like
hypothesis.
Probably like big psychology. Like Dan Gilbert put out a hit.
So that's the diagnosis. It seems ridiculous on the face of it when you take a step back that we would be doing studies on such a constrained sample and then saying this is a true feature of the human mind.
And just to put a pin on the diagnosis, the reason they're doing this is because their answer to the boundary problem was, we're only interested in human universals. And so if that's your answer, then you have to do that, because your experiment doesn't actually say anything about human universals. So what you have to do is kind of pretend that it does, if that's your answer to the boundary problem.
Right. And when pressed, I might say, well, yeah, but I didn't mean what I was saying in the discussion section. Like, I was just saying, like, oh, maybe this is true or whatever. Or I might say, well, what do you want me to do? Like, how many populations do I have to find that short-term memory is constrained by 10 minutes? And like, in how many populations do I have to find it? If I go to Michigan and Florida, do I also have to go to Winnipeg and then Tokyo? And then if I do that, will you then accept it? Or will I have to then go to, the Quechua children in Peru to show it? There's no end. Like, Tamler, how dare you put this burden on me to show this finding in every single conceivable population? Surely there's a boundary on what you're going to ask me to do.
Right. This is where I find it very frustrating. I don't think you're defending that answer.
No.
But it can be very frustrating. It's like, well, you should do the thing that you're saying you're doing. You can't just be like, well, what do you want me to do? Do you need me to have perfect evidence on every single person who's alive right now? It's like, well, no, but you have to do more than this, or you have to reframe what your conclusions are, which would make that paper never get published. So that's the issue. It's not enough to just say, well, what's your alternative? It's like, I don't need to have an alternative. I just need you to do the thing that you say you're doing.
Yeah. Or stop saying
you're doing it.
Yeah. which is in some ways what, like some combination of that is what they're proposing. Again, this is focused on trying to develop a way to talk about these cognitive mechanisms in a way that's not dishonest like that and takes into account the fact that some sort of judgment has to be made about where the boundary exists and where it doesn't, but one that seems like a more reasonable, at least a step in the right direction for cognitive science. And that is what they refer to as this principle of articulation. Articulation is the term that they're using to mean the interrelationship between cognitive mechanisms and the particular environment that a person is in.
We will use the term articulation to refer to the adaptive interrelation between features and affordances and provided by the environments in which they emerge, drawing on the original sense of articulation as referring to a joint, from Latin artis joint. We may say that cognitive features supporting literacy, for example, are articulated with an environment in which written materials are present and reading is advantageous. So if you're studying literacy, you would want to specify, I guess this is a very basic example, that this ability would only emerge in environments where reading was in some way advantageous. And you might even get more specific. It might only emerge when people have formal schooling, although I don't know if that would be true.
Yeah. And literacy is a good example because if you were to just sort of like land on, like in this part of the planet and you're an alien and you want to do some studies on features of human cognition, you would notice that one of the things that we do all the time and we do easily and we do it from a young age is read symbols visually and write them. And you could look at our brains and you would see that our brains are really good at processing strings of letters as words and attaching meaning to them. And you might think, wow, this is a universal feature of the human mind. Like it is a built-in, innate feature of the human mind that we construct these letters that have meaning and that we can easily process them and communicate that way. But that would obviously be ignoring the fact that through millions of years of human evolution, we never had a written word. Like there was no such thing as literacy.
And even now, there are cultures without writing.
Exactly. And so what seems like such an obvious, or what seems like such an obvious feature of the human mind is only obvious because of the nature of the environment in which literacy has flourished. Right? And so you can understand literacy and children or humans in a world in which there is formal education about writing as interaction between some very, very basic cognitive mechanisms like our ability to see things and categorize things and to assign meaning to arbitrary things, and the environment that rewards this particular way of manifesting, like of using those abilities. And so over time, you have a society where reading is important for success. You'll get more and more, you'll see that reading is a feature, an important feature of the mind. In fact, you might even get some selective pressures for people who have the kind of mechanisms that allow them to read better. And it's only when specifying the cognitive mechanism and the environment in which that cognitive mechanism is displaying itself that you can really understand how culture and cognition are interacting in this way.
And that's it's a nice, clear case, but also one in which, well, you say most cultures now are literate and it's helpful to read in virtually all cultures. And so if we're studying that, we can acknowledge to the side that there are probably people where this isn't developed as well. But then the more specific the subject that you're studying is, the more that is going to depend on kinds of environments that aren't as universal as just literacy. And this is where I think, A, the problem is greater, but B is I'm not totally sure how exactly you're supposed to specify or articulate like what would be adaptive or beneficial in that environment.
I think importantly, like what they're saying is this principle of articulation is it's still something where judgments have to be made about what the unit of analysis should be. So like the cognitive mechanisms and what cultures are.
I don't know, like the Mueller-Lyer illusion that I mentioned earlier, that is something that you will be susceptible to if you live in a world of geometry, square rooms.
Yeah, where there's lots of right angles.
Lots of right angles, and it won't be in other kinds of cultures. What you have there is a very clean-cut case of, well, here's an illusion you'll be susceptible if you live in this kind of environment, but not if you live in a different kind of environment. That seems totally unobjectionable. That seems like interesting. It doesn't feel like a boundary problem is threatened. Like, that's the more you know about that stuff, it would seem the better. It doesn't even seem not universal, because it's almost like a hypothetical. If you live here, you're susceptible to that. Yeah. If you live here, you're not.
Right.
So, but it's still universal in that sense.
So for those who don't know, the Mueller-Lyer illusion is the one you've probably come across many times. It's two lines that look like one is longer than the other, because for one line, there's like caret brackets pointing inward, and for the other line, it's caret brackets pointing outward. So it just turns out that we're using visual cues, the surrounding visual cues in the line, that are giving us a hint about the length of the line, right? So there's evidence, like Tamler said, that this is totally dependent on how many of these kinds of lines you encounter in everyday life. So yeah, that is a clear case. Like, it does get messy. And like, I was struggling as I was reading this paper with trying to understand like how I would apply this articulation principle like across other studies that I might think about. But let's give that fluid intelligence example that they give. Okay. So the other thing that they're talking about, one of the case studies that they bring up in this paper is Raven's progressive matrices. So Raven's progressive matrices is a task that's used in IQ testing where you're basically given a series of patterns and you're asked what the next pattern would be. So these are visual patterns, very basic visual patterns, and you're supposed to infer what the pattern of change is from one to the next and then give the right answer. And it's used because it's a kind of test that doesn't rely on verbal intelligence, like vocabulary. It's the kind that people like to say is sort of culturally independent because it's not, you didn't have to be raised knowing a particular set of concepts or being taught things.
Yeah.
And it's taken as a measure of fluid intelligence. So fluid intelligence is just that subset of what we call intelligence that is characterized by, sometimes referred to as just like raw processing power, like of the brain, whereas crystallized intelligence.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's better to use the other case to define fluid. So what people contrast with fluid intelligence is crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is something that gets better as we age because it's everything to do with knowledge. So things like vocabulary and verbal ability, facts about the world, those things actually get better as we get older. The more you learn about the world, the more intelligence you have in that.
Just by having the most number of facts.
Exactly, yeah. So there are kinds of IQ questions that might be like, what's the biggest capital city in Europe or something like that, right? Fluid intelligence is things like reaction time, processing power, very basic pattern detection like this that doesn't seem dependent on how much you know,
right?
How much you've learned, and that is the kind of intelligence that actually starts dropping off pretty quickly. Like when you're in your 20s, you just stop being as good at fluid intelligence fairly early on. Like there's like a lot of depressing data on this. Like by the time you're 20, 21, your reaction time is going down for some of these things.
But like, if I understand fluid intelligence, like you're making connections, you're being able to, that goes down too?
Yeah. So that real-time processing of information, of like novel information. That real, like I'm giving you.
But is it just a matter of how quickly you can do it or how like well you can do it?
It's how well you can do it and how quickly you can do it, and how quickly you can do it is often associated with how well you can do it.
Yeah.
But novel, like the Raven's progressive matrix, you're seeing patterns that presumably you've never seen before. And so there's no ability that knowledge is
right.
like.
You haven't memorized anything that will help with this.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, even that's probably questionable because you've memorized other kinds of tests like this that you've probably taken as a kid. And
you're familiar,
You're familiar with tests, period. This is a point that he makes, actually, right? Like
exactly. Yeah. So the idea here is that fluid intelligence is seen as this feature of the mind, like to the extent that that intelligence is a thing. We think that fluid intelligence is an aspect of human intelligence that emerges in all people. And importantly, that this is one of the ways in which we should measure it. And if you measure this in people, it turns out that, using Raven's progressive matrices does predict things like how good like your grades are going to be, like how much money you're going to make as an adult, like all kinds of stuff that you might think that intelligence should predict. And so you might then conclude like, yeah, this is a thing that smart people universally are able to do, and less smart people, as they quote the paper,
less clever
on this, less clever people are able to do less. And we kind of, again, build our theory of intelligence based on the way we measure it too, right? So we come up with an abstraction about what intelligence is. We come up with concrete ways to measure it that we think are sort of like true to the description that we've given. And then we kind of reify the concept of intelligence by calling it your score on Raven's progressive matrices.
That's the weird thing about when the operationalization becomes the actual definition of the construct.
Exactly. Right. So one of the things they point out is that this kind of like abstract context independent pattern matching is something that you're going to get in, say, highly schooled environments where one of the things that kids do constantly, like every single day, is they're moving from domain to domain, studying different things, and being explicitly sort of pointed out like the similarities and differences between these things. And that in cultures where you have much less of this, where say you're like not even pre-literate, but a culture where there's not a lot of schooling that goes on, you're a farmer, or your day consists of doing things that aren't really that different from each other, and there's no need to move from like radically different task to radically different task and develop these sort of meta skills of pattern detection. Does it really make sense to say that your performance on a Raven's progressive matrix is a measure of intelligence?
Right.
It seems as if the ability that we have to do Raven's progressive matrices pretty clearly seems like an outcropping of the fact that we have environments that we've created where doing this kind of shit is
rewarded. Yeah. Like you'll get better grades and you'll probably make more money because your job will require you to be able to do something like this. But it wouldn't be helpful. It wouldn't be beneficial in another kind of environment, or at least not to the same degree. And there's all these other forms of intelligence probably that you don't have that actually really would be helpful.
Yeah.
But is the whole point just to not say this measures how clever you are, or this measures how fluidly intelligent you are? Is that,
I think it's deeper than that.
I think so too.
Because I think that this is moving beyond just like because there have been a million critiques of intelligence and what it means and what it is, where people just say like, oh, you're missing kinetic intelligence or whatever. And this isn't saying this is a useless test of intelligence. It's saying, once you specify under what conditions, environmental conditions, this becomes a really highly advantageous skill to have. Like once you do that, that's fine to say like this is some sort of test of ability that is, albeit not necessarily universal and might not be universal in even in your definition of intelligence. It's still something that's important and clearly is predictive of success in this environment. Yeah. Once you specify in this environment, then you're not just saying like this is a dumb whatever, like culturally like insensitive test of intelligence. It's not just that. It's like
this is an ability that will serve you well if you live in this kind of environment with these affordances.
Exactly. And you put in here, like maybe we should talk about Boyd and Richardson, but this is like where it's clear, like not even an analogy, I guess, but it's just like really of the same ilk as the gene culture coevolution stuff, but rather than gene culture, it's cognitive mechanism culture stuff. One example that I was thinking of, and I actually don't know if people talk about this or whether it's even like kosher to talk about it, but here's an example of maybe like a mix between gene culture coevolution and maybe some of this. I have a theory that autism spectrum traits, like people with Asperger's or whatever on the spectrum, that we have increasingly created environments where the kinds of abilities that those people have are beneficial.
Right.
So like when I was a kid, if you did like computer programming, like I had like a TRS 80, machine where like I could have like a little book of basic programs and like I could do it. Like that ability was not important. Like at that point,
you could get your ass kicked, like showing too much of that ability.
Exactly. Exactly. We have now created a world in which your ability to do that effectively is so highly valued that the kinds of positive traits that people on the spectrum have probably are outweighing the negative traits, like the hit that you might take in sociability or whatever it is. And so I think this is, right, from a gene culture coevolution perspective, it might very well be that incidences of spectrum disorders are on the rise because there's selective pressures for the things that come along with it in terms of the kind of intelligence.
Although there's not enough generations that this has been true for this. It's got to be more like it's a dormant property that normally we're tuned to suppress, but then now if it's no longer beneficial to us express it, like we have the flexibility to... Yeah.
Right. So the one way in which it could happen in a few generations is, which I think is happening in Silicon Valley. Yeah. Again, maybe I'm going to get in trouble for saying this.
It's clearly true.
You create an environment. You create an environment where that kind of nerd that we used to get beat up for is actually like super rich and high status, and they are more likely to attract somebody to marry than they ever would have been before. And so they have kids, and it seems like a pretty straightforward way that in a few generations you might have more kids on the spectrum, because more kids on the spectrum were reproducing.
Right.
This is a complete speculation on my end.
David Pizarro, just to be clear, I know people sometimes get confused between us. That was David Pizarro.
My email is tamler@gmail. But in the case of cognitive mechanism and articulation, again, like it's easy to see that as a certain set of skills and abilities and that rely on certain cognitive mechanisms become more and more important, that these are going to be the kind that flourish and that we might start mistaking for universal if we don't bother to specify the environments in which they're emerging. Yep. And I think one of the things that I really liked in this paper was a sort of lamentation that we might be running out of cultures that aren't heavily schooled or pre-literate, and we'll lose out on an understanding of the richness of the human mind if we don't catalog those, if we don't get to those populations.
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, everything's getting more homogenized. Everything's getting more the same now, to an extent, right? But that's right. In the same way, you don't want to lose species of animals, have them go extinct. You never get to study them ever again. We don't want to have non-autists go extinct.
We're not completely overrun by a spectrum.
Getting bullied by their necklaces. They still end up getting bullied, one way or the other, just by their AI necklaces.
Can you imagine though if in 200 years people are like, what's this empathy that old-timey people used to talk about? Did they just make it up? It's like dragons.
So they would just go out and sit by a fire and have some beers and no glasses or anything?
They would have a VR fire?
They would go on hikes by themselves and not
they wouldn't go hikes in studios. Yeah. Oh God. So, all right, they give one more example that I think is kind of interesting. I don't know if we want to talk about, and that is attachment and attachment theory, where they discuss the method of using this strange situation, which I don't know how much you know about this, but do you know about the strange situation paradigm? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a method to try to determine how attached your child is, what kind of attachment it has with its caregiver. And the way they would do this is they have say a mother and a child come in to the lab and they start playing, they have some toys, and they then have a stranger come in, a complete stranger, and then they have the mother leave.
Yeah.
And what they measure is the reaction of the child to the mother when the mother returns. And so what you will see is that a pattern seems to emerge that in some cases, children get really withdrawn from the mother when she returns. In some cases, they are happy. They go give her a hug and then they keep playing. In some cases, they're super distressed. And depending on how they respond, you categorize them as securely attached or anxiously attached. The theory goes that how you bond with your parent forms a template for all of your subsequent relationships in life. And that might be true. That might very well be the case that the way that you respond to your mom after she's left you alone in the room with a stranger actually does determine how happy your relationships are when you're an adult.
Or the structure of your relationships, yeah.
Yeah. But as they point out, like, surely like this measure can't be treated as a universal when we have cultures in which the way in which children are treated and raised and like communally, like this is not a threatening thing. Like this is not. And so if the child doesn't give a rat's ass, if the mother leaves and it comes back, in the US, we might say like, oh, they're ambivalent about, like they have an ambivalent attachment style. But in another culture, you might say like, well, what? Like
they're secure.
Yeah, it's of no use for them to get distressed and be mad at their mom, like because they're not under any kind of weird.
Or to be even like, I'm so happy to see you.
Exactly.
It's like they're always
it's
around,
like
and if she's not around, my grandma and my aunt and my 6 cousins are around.
Exactly. Yeah. And so to treat attachment theory in particular, like there's something similar about the Ravens thing and the attachment thing, where it's using the outcome of a measure to then feed into the theory. Yeah. Like if it's like so obvious that the responses depend on the environment in which these people have been raised, then it doesn't make any sense to say it's universal.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great example. And and like how exactly you deal with that, and because not every society is either communal or individualized, and how you divide that up and how you specify it. This is the part that I think needs further development, is how you're going to articulate what would be beneficial and what just the environment is, is a really difficult thing to do, as I think they acknowledge. But you could see a lot of controversy about how somebody decides to specify an environment and what the range of what they're talking about encompasses. Because if you just do America or the West, that's obviously going to be too broad. But again, you have that boundary problem. But if you just say, in the Pizarro household, it is beneficial to,
to like shut up when I tell you to.
Shut your ass up or you get a smack. Then you'll probably be very have a lot of self-control about speaking.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what the right answer is here too, because this does require a lot of work for you to like think about what features of an environment are relevant to the cognitive constructs that you're talking about, and that's not always obvious. Because even if I say, okay, I did this study on disgust sensitivity and whatever moral judgment, what feature of the environment should I point out as potentially being relevant?
Yeah.
Like it's not obvious to me. Like I could do my best and specify that these are like Cornell students who were raised in middle class environments
with toilets, with like flush toilets.
Yeah, like it's not clear what the articulation is without doing some serious theoretical work.
All right. So speaking of attachment anxiety, I have a dog right now that's downstairs that may be experiencing it. So I want to wrap up, but let me ask you this last question, because I think we've talked about this issue and this last question is a little irresolvable. But like, I feel like this is a pattern with these kinds of papers, these kind of, I don't know if I'd call them interventions, but in some ways they're kind of interventions. We're going about this wrong. And this is a very constructive, as we've talked about, like version of one of these papers. Here's what we have to do it right. But that's always a little sketchy, And then like, I feel like a lot of times people acknowledge this. Like I bet people will think this is a really good paper. It's making really compelling points. But then when faced with the task of actually doing what they're suggesting, no, they can't, for all the problems you just raised. Like just these simple questions about like, how would I go about doing this? And so it just gets dropped. Like it just gets, that's the pin. It's like, okay, but that's something we want to put a pin in, but I don't exactly know how to do it. And then it just gets dropped, and, it'll be brought up every 5 or 10 years by somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big concern of mine too. Like to retain some optimism, I actually think that if a paper makes a compelling point like this and it offers a solution of some sort, it may be that like 0.03% of people actually take it seriously enough to try to do this work later. So like, in thinking about my own work, am I going to bother doing something like that? I think in the work on disgust, I think it actually is worth doing.
Yeah.
And so I'm of the opinion that like, hopefully this causes some people to think a little bit more deeply about things, but the masses, we're never going to be content with
that. But I mean, you could like with disgust, just off the top of my head, places with like sewage, places with antibiotics, places with like disinfect, all those kinds of things would clearly make a difference, unless I think people implicitly go with the kind of evolutionary psychologist hypothesis, which is these are things that developed 200,000 years ago. Right. So it really doesn't matter where you live right now. It's either,
which is the hand waving that I'm prone to doing, but that's an empirical claim. Like if it doesn't work in some culture, I've been lucky enough to work with people who have like collaborated with me to study this stuff in other cultures. But if we don't see it in some cultures, we can't just ignore it.
Yeah.
So when I read a paper like this, I'm more concerned with, can this make what I do better?
Yeah.
But the journals are going to be disappointing no matter.
Yeah. Well, that's
like you're just never. Yeah, hopefully
we'll
a lot
always
of
have
think
opening
that way,
segments to do. You won't run out of those.
True.
All right. That was fun. I will keep trying to press more methodological critiques. Even though I put this in the Slack, I think you suggested it.
Yeah, some of them are good.
All right, join us next time on Very Bad Wizards.
The great and boss has spoken. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Who are you? Who are you? A very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Good man. They think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have.
Pay no attention to that man.
Anybody can have a brain.
You're a very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Just a very bad wizard.